All right, why don't we get started for those that joined? Anybody else that comes in, we'll kind of catch them up along the way. So I want to thank everybody for attending this webinar. It's one of in our series of informational webinars. Today, we're really to talk about cyber risk and cyber insurance. And thank you for joining. The agenda that you'll see come up next on the screen. We're going to keep it really tight as we have to sit down and kind of introduce you to kind of what matters from the cyber insurance side of things. I'm going to introduce you to our speaker, Vince Naples, but I also want to make sure that you understand kind of how the industry has shifted. Vince and I will kind of walk you through that as well. And our sponsor today, or really our partner in this conversation, Vince works for Risk Strategies, who is one of the largest privately held insurance brokers out in the industry. And Vince will get into a little bit about how the industry has shifted and the importance of the insurance broker into the model, and really what's important. On the next slide, what I think you'll see, and this is something that I don't think people kind of have a view into very often, is why this topic has become so important. If we kind of roll back even like 6, 7 years ago, there was the beginning onsets or the middle onsets of just all of the attacks are happening, all the breaches that are happening. It happened to high profile organizations, millions of dollars at risk, private information at risk. And over that time, everybody was signing up for cyber insurance. And I think at one point, the insurance industry was kind of thinking that, hey, we're going to, just give everybody insurance and the actuarial side of things will kind of figure themselves out. And there was this very brief period of time where they were getting burned. They were getting a lot of claims coming in because there weren't a lot of readiness and protections in place. And during those like 2 or 3 years, the insurance industry has really caught up to sit down and understand in a very black and white scenario, what are the things that are important to have in place to sit down and protect yourselves? For those that might have heard me talk before, I talk a lot about what is the capability of an organization to protect itself and its capability to recover. That, in cold hard fact, is really what the cyber insurance industry cares about more than anything else. And they want to see those kinds of things in place. And this statistically, when we sit down and actually look at customers and talk to prospects, this is a survey that was done out there, but it really does mirror pretty closely to what we found, is a lot of people don't understand how cyber insurance fits into your portfolio of readiness. They don't understand what the coverage models are. In some cases, they think it's a very low risk of being attacked, so why would I spend the money? Or they think it's pretty expensive. So we're going to try to debunk some of this information for you as we go through the process today. As I mentioned on the next slide, what I think is important, and we've taken this approach to a layered security readiness model. This lays out a lot of things that an organization, regardless of size, 25 to 250 person SMB to a 20,000 privately held company. It's a matter of really understanding the things that you should or could consider having in place to better protect yourself and better recover. And what we've done is highlighted in green the things that the insurance industry looks at, right? These are kind of black and white things. Are you doing testing? If you're doing testing, compliance testing, external, internal penetration, are you remediating those? They want to know that you're doing that. Is anybody watching the endpoints? Do you have a SOC or SIEM in place to sit down and actually know if there are anomalies taking place? Are you doing patching on any kind of regular cadence? And where cadence used to be nebulous before, the insurance industry is shifting to actually asking for every 2 weeks. And some might say, hey, I don't even have time to kind of test it. But in the mind of the insurance industry, and I'm speaking in general, it's better in their mind that you've done the most latest patch that might have a bug or a leak in it rather than don't do any patching. You're more exposed for the next month or 3 months based on blackout dates and things like that. So there's anecdotal information I can give you on every one of these things in green, but this is the type of information that when you're applying for insurance for the first time or you're reapplying, the insurance industry is looking for. So the bar itself has elevated, but what we're also seeing in that elevation is some of the rates are coming down. So this is where whatever your watermark in your head might have been or whatever your real reality was, you might be plus or minus 10 or 15% of that based on the reality of your organization's readiness. And I just wanted to kind of set the stage for that. So as an introduction, and Vince was kind enough to give us some time. Vince is a senior account manager over in this national security practice for Risk Strategies. He's got a tremendous amount of experience in this field, talks and speaks to a lot of organizations out there. He just came off of a 300-person presentation. I think it was like a week or so ago. So Vince, thank you for joining us, and we're looking forward to hearing about your perspective on the industry.
Yeah, so thanks so much for the warm welcome. So I guess we'll get right into it. So what are the risks exactly to you and your organization? I think a great place to start would be ransomware. So once ransomware emerged onto the scene as a major threat, it flipped the entire cyber landscape on its head. Ransomware Institute is constituted of a bad actor breaching a commercial business's infrastructure and gaining access to its critical data that is stored. Once they are to gain this access to the data, they often exfiltrate that data back to themselves and encrypt the files on your network. So in order to receive what we call the decryption key, businesses are often extorted via Bitcoin requests to regain access to their files. So yeah, in recent years, bad actors have now begun to unfortunately double extort their victims by threatening to post the exfiltrated information online, even after, let's say, you paid the Bitcoin to get that decryption key. So, and all the other bubbles that you see on your screen as well, ransomware can actually lead to all these different ways of financial impairment. So, ransomware is the big one in the space at the moment. Business interruption. So, if you as a commercial business were to experience downtime and are rendered inoperable due to a security event, more than likely that will come with a major cost. We'll discuss the insurance part of this a bit more later in the presentation, but often this specific insuring agreement on a cyber policy is hit the hardest due to the costly net income loss associated with these types of incidents. So yeah, cyber policies look to approach this risk from a comprehensive perspective by not only insuring companies for their own network, but also provide coverage if one of your important service providers were to go down, and as a result of that, you experience downtime of your own. So the next bubble, reputational harm. Similar to business interruption, if you as a business has this event and that event is made public via publication, website, something of that nature, reputational issues can and will arise. It is common to see individual businesses experience this net income loss and loss of customers if they were to experience some type of data security event which impacts or exposes some of that consumer data that you are entrusted with. So yeah, very important. Those two are an immediate result of these types of incidents. So yeah, regulatory obligations and consequences. As time goes on, more and more regulation is becoming prevalent, and protecting consumer data is entrusted to you as a commercial business, and the government is making more and more regulation. One major exposure is the cost associated with violating regulation due to one of these events. This includes the cost associated with both the defense and the penalties. I'm not going to get into too much detail about each individual regulation, but some of the major ones in recent times include GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation, the California Consumer Protection Act, CCPA, BIPA, which is the Biometric Information Privacy Act, HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, TCPA, which is the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, VIPA, the Video Privacy Protection Act, and PCI, which is the Payment Card Industry Regulation. So the list it can go on, and it keeps growing year by year. So very important to stay in tune with the types of regulation you could be violating. Next up, business email compromise. This is a major risk to businesses as it is a clear-cut gateway for bad actors to cause financial harm. So if someone were to gain access to an email that they might not and should not have the authorization to get access to, they can possibly be the catalyst for a major cyber incident occurring. And this can include the following examples: funds transfer fraud, my arch nemesis ransomware once again, and of course social engineering, which is very, very prevalent at this time. So yeah, the bad actor has the ability to compromise an email. This gives them time to learn the ways of your business and strategize their best way to make financial gain from you. Last but not least, the privacy concerns associated with being hacked are immense. When cyber insurance first became a product, the third liability exposure was all the policies look to insure against. If a cyber incident were to take place and consumer data was accessed and shared, there's potential for a costly class action lawsuit. The costs are derived from both the defense and potential settlement and judgment, similar to if you were to violate regulation. So those are some of the major risks in the space. There's definitely more. But as we move on to the next slide, cyber insurance. And this is why this became a thing, because the costly nature of these incidents. So, and for that reason, that's why it became such an essential product for commercial businesses. So yeah, cyber insurance is used by businesses to transfer their risk associated with the many different types of cyber issues. So in addition to providing, the comprehensive coverage for these issues, a cyber policy serves as a great roadmap for working through these issues and connects businesses with the proper channels in order to mitigate any greater financial harm. So yeah, most incidents will result in costs associated with breach response, litigation, and business interruption, which I will dive into a bit more once we talk about the individual insurance coverages.
Hey Vince, one question in this space,
Absolutely.
if you can clear up maybe a misconception or reality. So we've had prospects and clients in the past that have actually gotten a rider, like a cyber rider on their standard policy rather than a specific cyber insurance policy. From what I've thought, that rider really covers more to the damage of equipment or things like that that might have been impacted during the attack, rather than all the things that you kind of listed on this slide that would be covered in a separate and specific policy. Is that true, or partially true, or not true at all?
Yeah, so it's actually great that you bring that up. So back when I was an underwriter in this space, those are the things that I would often be competing against, was that people would they would say, hey, I'm actually covered via rider on my, my CGL or property coverage. And those riders actually don't provide the necessary comprehensive cover that you would actually need for any type of first party damage. So, and they oftentimes as well are subject to very low sublimits, and will not have broad language to cover the different types of incidents that we see rapidly evolving in the space. And that just ups the need to have your own individual standalone cyber policy. So, yeah, no, absolutely correct in saying that it covers a lot less than what you would see on a traditional cyber policy. And that's why it's very important to look to obtain the full package.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, before speaking about the lengthy list of different insurance agreements that you'll find on the policy, I believe it's important to distinguish between what a first party versus third party coverage is. So all first party coverages, they look to insure your business for your own costs due to the event, right? So this is your breach. You need to reach out to whomever to get some breach coach, any legal counsel. Those are things that are happening to your business that is causing you financial harm. And third party coverages insure businesses for their liability that is associated with these types of events. If you were sued, any type of regulation, which I spoke about 2 slides ago. And yeah, so the distinction is your costs versus you are sued for causing damage to somebody else. So yeah, as previously stated, cyber insurance emerged as a product in 1997, and the policy only looked to address that third party exposure. But since then, obviously the landscape has developed, and more bad actors have come onto the scene, and these different types of losses that we were seeing. So cyber insurance now looks to comprehensively cover you for all risks associated with what we're seeing in the space, even new emerging trends. So here is a good summary of the different insurance agreements that we see on the policy. And I'm going to go through the third party coverages first, starting with the network security and privacy liability. So this is coverage for your defense, damages, and settlements arising out of a lawsuit relative to your data security of your consumer data that you are entrusted with. And if there was a class action against you, that, and like I said before, was the core of cyber policies for a very long time. So surely important to have comprehensive limit there to indemnify you in the case that you are sued. Media liability, this is something that isn't often talked about enough in its importance. Is something that was seen as a addition to a cyber policy to encompass all types of risk associated with any type of online engagement. This includes if you were to publish media or electronic media specifically. This will cover you for any type of media wrongful act. So if you infringe copyright infringement, something of that nature, via electronic publication, this would cover you for the defense, damage, and settlements like the other liability coverages. And once again, regulatory liability also cover the defense costs, fines, and penalties arising out of an investigation of a regulatory body. So federal, international, and state. And then last of the liability coverages is the PCI coverage. This, like the others, is defense, the fines, and obviously it's really important to protect credit card information, and you do not want credit card information to get in the wrong hands, because not only is that information super important to your consumers, this is something that you can receive pretty significant fines for. So always making sure that you have the right protection and control in place to protect those credit card numbers. And so as we move on to the first party coverages, every type of incident is initiated via breach response coverages. So what this is, it gives you access to cyber specific legal counsel that you have, hopefully reviewed when purchasing the policy to make sure that you have your preferred legal counsel that is included on the policy for advice and coaching through the process. Also, this is cost to, retain a breach coach and the forensic consultants, any PR firms, and any other vendors to actually notify those that you may have, your incident may have caused their data to get into the wrong hands. So any type of incident, whether it's social engineering, somebody just had gained unauthorized access, or especially a ransomware incident where that data is actually taken hostage via a bad actor, the breach response coverages look to address first on the policy. Next up, cyber extortion. So this is the ransomware coverage of your cyber policy. It's either listed as cyber extortion or ransomware. So this coverage actually specifically indemnifies you for if you were to pay the extortion demand. Oftentimes this is paid in Bitcoin per bad actor request. And a misconception that is often seen is that you would think that your insurance policy or your insurance carrier would look to pay that ransom on behalf of you. So that is actually not the case. And you as the individual would have to pay that ransom, which is oftentimes not the advised approach, depends on what the situation is. But they would then indemnify you for the amount of funds that you were transferred to get that decryption key. And oftentimes too, a great thing about these cyber policies is that they will connect you with a professional cyber extortion demand individual who is a negotiator in this situation. That has become a very important thing, and it's very real that these people have sat down and spoke to these different bad actors before, and they've developed relationships. They know how to communicate with these bad actors when trying to get your data back. Data restoration. So this is when if somebody breaks into your system, gains access, and damages your data, or completely takes it, right? So there's going to be costs to restore that data depending on what industry class you're in, and that is extremely costly. And the cyber policy looks to indemnify you for those losses. Computer hardware replacement, also known as brick-in. So this is if, let's say, you have some sort of event where that renders your either software or computer hardware inoperable, it will actually look to replace that hardware. So if your computer is what we call a brick, the cyber policy will look to give you coverage to replace that brick. Next up is probably the most important, is the network or business interruption, because in cases of these ransomware events, if they were to gain access to your application functionality of your business, and you would have no access to continue as a business, the net income loss could be huge, and the extra expense that you would incur to get back up and running is extremely costly. So very important. Cyber policies look to cover this in multiple ways, including if, let's say, your network was breached, an important service provider or vendor of yours was breached. And also too, let's say if you had an unexpected system failure, a lot of these policies look to cover you for that as well. That if, let's say there was no bad actor intrusion, but you had a failure of your systems, there will still be a cost associated with that if you cannot conduct business based off of a system failure. Rep harm, which I've already spoken about, is the loss of net income due to, an adverse media publication. That definition changes policy to policy, but oftentimes is subject to an adverse media publication. And yeah, so there's often negative attention from these types of events. So definitely important that coverage is included. And last but definitely not least is cybercrime. So this is one of those things that similar to extortion, where it looks to cover you for that exact dollar amount that would be transferred in a social engineering event, or let's say somebody gained access to your banking information and made a direct transfer themselves. Yeah, this insurance agreement would look to indemnify you there. And this coverage is also, early on when I was an underwriter, it was seen as an addition to the cyber policy as crime policies did not look to address this risk any longer, as the costs were getting too great, as these types of incidents are happening all of the time. So very important to have an additional cybercrime limit on your cyber policy. So next up, we have the market. So I'm happy to announce that after years of crazy volatility, that the market has begun to stabilize quite a bit. This is due to the increased levels of capacity in the space and underwriters now being able to identify the exact types of business they want on their book and understanding the landscape a little bit more. So yeah, it's extremely important. The market, let's say 5 years ago, is a completely different place and it's gone up and down. So it is a breath of fresh air that now I can walk into a insurance proposal meeting with a smile on my face with my clients. So I'll speak a little bit more on the next slide about controls, but I did want to touch on, although the market has stabilized, the claims activity has not slowed down. We've seen more and more ransomware this year and last year than we ever had before, even in the major change to cyberspace where insurers were reluctant to provide coverage anymore. But yeah, so this is due to not only ransomware, but the different types of systemic exposure that we've seen and instances that you've probably heard of, such as, the Change Healthcare incident and the crowd out outage that even had an airline be inoperable. So there's emerging trends all the time, and the marketplace is constantly evolving to address those concerns. And yeah, so next slide, we're gonna move into some cyber controls.
For 1 second, then. So I think one of the things to point out is, as we also talk from our side, so we perform proactive incident response assessments to help organizations understand, again, how capable protect, how capable recover in preparation for cyber insurance or to improve the rates. When you look at some of the data in the left-hand side of the boxes, certain industries like healthcare, education, there's a lot of PII information. There's also, the notion of being, less driven by profits alone. The advancements in technology and investments in security are sometimes less than in other areas like financial. They're different targets. Some targets are because they're less prepared and have a lot of data. Other ones are because the pot of gold is very large but have lots of protection. So, it's a mixed bag inside of that challenged industries. But when you look at that bottom left, those are kind of the things I pointed out when you look at that assessment capability of making sure that things are as safe as possible. So some of this comes with investments that are recommended to sit down and just elevate, raise the bar so the threat actor has a harder time getting in. Part of what we've seen, and I don't think we talked about this, Vince, in the last 5 or 6 years, there was a tremendous effort by the threat actor to steal sensitive data and sell it on the open market. That we're seeing is becoming less and less a case, as opposed to disruption and preventing you from conducting business. Right. And when we talk to businesses, large and small, and the ones, the mid-sized and small ones know this even better, they know how much a disruption is, how much one day costs them. So we on a Sunday morning, we got a phone call from a prospect customer that was actually in the car wash business, and 3/4 of his car washes were locked down because the point of sale device was actually shut down. He knew exactly that he was losing $10,000 a day. not even a question in his mind. And now it's a matter of how do I get up? What do I do? What are my opportunities? What do I do now? What do I do later on to prevent this from ever happening again? So this ability to sit down and actually stop you from conducting business is really the biggest aspect of things to worry about. And we also know that the time that the threat actor is actually in your environment 2 years ago was around in the 90-day time frame. It's almost at 300 days because it's harder to figure out how to maneuver and how to stop you from conducting business rather than just kind of weaving their way to the pot of gold and then pulling that out and saying, I've got this, do you want it back? So it's really shifted tremendously on what a threat actor is interested in, how this kind of goes down.
Yep, and perfectly said. So the threat landscape is continuously evolving, and just like that, the cybersecurity industry has followed suit, right? So emerging new trends in the cyber threat landscape, like the ones that Christopher just mentioned, have caused cyber insurers to up their baseline to the security amongst those that are applying for their insurance. Some of the baseline controls, in order to obtain coverage, um, include the following. So it's multi-factor authentication, which I'm sure most of you have heard of. And this is important not only to protect your email address, but also for your remote access to your network, backups, and any usage of privileged credentials. Endpoint detection and response, which scans your endpoints for any type of malware intrusion. And if any abnormality is noticed by the tool, it'll look to isolate it and begin the process of its removal. Formalized planning. This includes, the business continuity planning, disaster recovery, and incident response planning. Having one of these formal plans in place is essential for a smooth process in dealing with the incident and mitigating any enhanced costs. So becoming more and more prevalent and equally as important in recent times are tools such as a PAM, or Privileged Access Management Solution, regular cybersecurity training, and patch management. And also somebody who regularly speaks with IT staff and executives. The enhancement and investment into strengthening cybersecurity has tremendously grown over the past couple years, and the cyber market has changed as well. So on this slide, I'm especially with the amount of time that we have left, I won't get into crazy detail, but here are some of our specific capabilities of our strategies and what a cyber specific broker would look to do, right? So it's, the assessment analytics is making sure that you're covered adequately and look to assess what you're doing in your infrastructure via information provided on applications. Look to help you plan, right? Getting you with the right partners, mitigate that risk up front rather than incurring the cost after the fact that a ransomware incident would occur. Especially market knowledge. We have access to over 40 direct markets in the space, and relationships is what results in the most comprehensive and competitive coverage and enhancing that level of competition in the space. And also we have a dedicated claims team that's available 24/7 to our insureds to make sure that whatever the incident is, that's addressed right away. So thank you very much. And any questions, feel free to send them through. I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we touched on, but maybe could go a little deeper on in kind of the readiness piece is when you sit down and look at where most of the breaches are coming from, about 60% are actually caused by a third-party partner of yours, right? So we had previously done a thing a couple of weeks ago on third-party risk management. Realistically, that is one of the biggest risks. In addition to looking at yourself, third-party risk is actually becoming the largest potential gateway into having a problem. And we also know a little over 50% don't monitor anything with their third parties at all. So when you're kind of looking at some of the potential risk, it really is sitting down and almost starting from scratch, which is why there isn't this, 1 through 5 step of how you do it. The very beginning is actually a conversation with someone, whether that's your insurance carrier or a consulting, governance, risk and compliance or security consulting firm like CyberSecOp, to help understand exactly where you are. And that might be, what do I got a renewal? What can I do to protect myself and get a better rate? Or if I'm starting from scratch, give me an assessment of where I am and am I really ready to go in for cyber insurance and what my expectations may be. So as Vince said, I want to thank everybody for joining. We will get a recording out to everybody that attended and registered, and then we'll provide you some information as well as an opportunity to sit down and set up individual meetings if you'd like that. So thank you so much, Vince. Thank you for your time, and we hope you guys have a great day.
Absolutely.